Dallas McCarver wasn't just another up-and-coming name in bodybuilding. For a lot of insiders and hardcore fans, he was the guy who represented the future of the open division. Young, massive, and built on an incredible frame, he looked like one of those once-in-a-generation competitors. Every time he stepped on stage, you could clearly see the progress. He wasn't just improving, he was evolving in real time. Nicknamed Big Country, the name fit him perfectly. His sheer size hit you first, but that wasn't the whole story. He had dense muscle, serious volume, and a level of maturity in his physique that you rarely see in someone that young. Online, his following was exploding. He was becoming more than an athlete, he was turning into a symbol of power, ambition, and raw potential. Industry media started treating him like one of the sport's biggest future stars. Analysts pointed out his structural advantages, his insane ability to pack on muscle, and most of all, his competitive mindset. Every time he walked out under those stage lights, it was obvious he wasn't there just to participate. He wanted to dominate. He wanted his name carved into bodybuilding history. And little by little, the entire bodybuilding world started watching him more closely. But every meteoric rise has a backstory. While the present showed trophies, projections, and sky-high expectations, the road there didn't start under bright lights and applause. Long before the warning signs appeared, the ones that would later change everything, there was a foundation being built quietly, far away from the spotlight. Because Dallas McCarver's story isn't just about rapid growth and success. It's about where he came from. It's about how a kid from a small rural town was shaped long before he ever dreamed of stepping on the Mr. Olympia stage. To understand how he climbed so high and why things eventually took an unexpected turn, we have to go back to the beginning. Before the bright stages and the social media buzz, Dallas was just a country kid from Tennessee. Born on April 9, 1991, he grew up on a farm near Jackson, surrounded by horses, cattle, and responsibilities most teenagers never experience. There was no glamour. No trophies. Just hard work, discipline, and mornings that started before the sun even came up. Life on the farm was demanding. Hauling hay bales that could easily weigh 50 to 75 pounds, around 23 to 34 kilos, feeding livestock, cleaning stalls, and helping maintain the property were part of his daily routine. It wasn't optional, it was necessary. That lifestyle built something no coach could teach: real discipline, physical and mental toughness, and an unshakable work ethic. In high school, he started standing out in football. His above-average size made people notice, and his natural strength was obvious. He wasn't just big, he was dominant on the field. But while most people saw a promising football player, maybe something bigger was already taking shape behind the scenes. Something beyond the gridiron. Back then, he didn't even have easy access to a real gym. No car, no fancy equipment, so he improvised. He lifted hay bales, carried heavy water buckets weighing dozens of pounds, dragged equipment across the farm. What could have been seen as a limitation became an advantage. He was building brute strength the old-school way. At 16, everything started to shift. When he finally got his driver's license, it wasn't just freedom, it was access to a real gym. After years of makeshift training, he could now use barbells, plates, and machines. It was a whole new world. And without fully realizing it, that simple milestone was pulling him closer to the future he was beginning to envision. Around that time, something happened that deeply impacted him. He came across a bodybuilding magazine featuring the 2005 Mr. Olympia on the cover, with Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler front and center. Seeing physiques develop to that extreme level left him stunned. He couldn't believe the human body could reach that point. He read that magazine over and over again, studying every detail, every image. And somewhere in that quiet moment, a decision was made. Even while he was still focused on football, bodybuilding had taken over his thoughts. He knew he had to finish his chapter in school sports, but deep down, he understood that wasn't the final destination. He could already picture himself stepping on stage, competing, sculpting his body into a masterpiece of muscle. How many teenagers have that kind of clarity about who they want to become? But Dallas didn't rush. He developed a strategic mindset early on. He knew he needed to build a solid foundation, strengthen his joints, add overall mass, learn how to train heavy and smart before diving fully into bodybuilding. Instead of skipping steps, he chose patience. And that patience would become one of the defining traits of his journey. When people asked him why he wanted that lifestyle, his answer was simple: it was his destiny. It wasn't a trend. It wasn't some phase driven by ego. It was conviction. After graduating high school, Dallas took another big step and enrolled at Bethel University in Tennessee. At that point, he was still holding on to the dream of playing football, but his body was already transforming fast. He had bulked up to around 120 kilos, about 265 pounds. That's serious size. But it also raised an unavoidable question: was that weight actually helping him on the field? At 5 feet 11 inches, 1.80 meters, Dallas started realizing he didn't quite fit the ideal NFL mold. On top of that, the constant collisions were taking their toll. Frequent injuries, accumulated wear and tear, and the reality that your future depends on coaches, selections, and decisions outside your control began to weigh on him. He understood something that didn't sit well with his competitive mindset: in football, your individual effort doesn't always guarantee the outcome. That's when bodybuilding started making even more sense. Unlike football, this was 100% on him. Discipline, diet, training, recovery, every detail was under his control. Success or failure would be a direct reflection of his own choices. That level of personal accountability pulled him in completely. With the help of a friend who was both a trainer and a nutritionist, Dallas began planning his bodybuilding debut. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was random. There was strategy behind it. He dedicated months strictly to gaining size before dialing everything in for competition shape. It was a calculated, intentional transition. His diet reflected that same straightforward mindset. No crazy gimmicks. No exotic extremes. Just consistent basics: steak, chicken, rice, potatoes. The goal was clear: grow, and grow well. From that point on, football was officially in the rearview mirror. The road to the big bodybuilding stages had been drawn. And it didn't take long. When Dallas stepped on stage for the first time as a bodybuilder, he weighed about 109 kilos, roughly 241 pounds. For many, he was just another rookie trying to make a name for himself. But what happened shocked everyone. He won his first 2 competitions. That kind of immediate impact is rare. It wasn't luck, it was preparation meeting real talent. What stood out even more was his mindset. He said he didn't feel nervous. While many competitors freeze under the judges' eyes, Dallas saw the stage as a chance to enjoy the moment. He didn't compete under pressure. He competed with confidence. There was something different about the way he carried himself. At just 21 years old, he achieved something historic. He won the IFBB North American Championships. With that victory, he became one of the youngest athletes ever to win a pro qualifying event. That wasn't just a title, it was a statement. Dallas wasn't planning to slowly build a career over decades. He was fast-tracking his rise. Between 2012 and 2015, he won 3 out of the 5 IFBB competitions he entered. Each win strengthened the narrative growing in the bodybuilding media. His physique was massive, dense, and increasingly refined. He combined size with structure, a rare and highly valued combination in the open division. People started talking. Loudly. He wasn't just promising anymore, he was becoming a threat. Soon, the inevitable question came up: was he a future Mr. Olympia? His imposing frame was getting global attention, and his rate of progress seemed limitless. But in professional sports, the higher you climb, the heavier the pressure becomes. And sometimes, behind dramatic growth, there's a silent price being paid. With his meteoric rise came enormous expectations. At the Arnold Classic Australia, Dallas arrived as the favorite to win. Fans were anticipating a major showdown with Brandon Curry, and the confidence surrounding him was obvious. He was bigger, denser, and looked ready to take over the stage. Everything pointed to another strong step toward the top. But what happened there changed everything. During prejudging, something unexpected occurred. In the middle of the mandatory poses, under intense stage lights and maximum pressure, Dallas nearly collapsed. The crowd was stunned. Judges, competitors, and medical staff rushed to assist him. Shortly after, he withdrew from the competition. The favorite to win wasn't coming back on stage that night. What was supposed to be just another dominant appearance turned into a moment of shock, tension, and serious concern. Later, Dallas revealed he had been dealing with a serious respiratory infection. According to reports, he'd already been showing symptoms before the competition. Even so, he chose to step on stage. And that decision raises a hard question: how far should an athlete push through warning signs from their own body in the name of competition? That collapse wasn't just a random incident. It was a warning. A clear sign that something wasn't right. His body had already been under massive strain. The intensity of his training, his high body weight, well over 260 pounds, around 118 plus kilos, in the offseason, and the extreme demands of contest prep were starting to take their toll. But like many driven competitors, he may have believed he could just power through it. The Arnold Classic Australia became a turning point. For the first time, the image of invincibility started to crack. Even though Dallas promised to come back stronger, that moment left a shadow that was hard to ignore. And tragically, the worst was still ahead. On August 22, 2017, the bodybuilding world froze. Dallas McCarver was only 26 years old when he was found unresponsive in his home in Boca Raton, Florida. At first, the information spread in a confusing wave of rumors. But within hours, it became global news. Reports stated he was found face down, with food still in his mouth. The scene raised immediate questions. Friends and people close to him acted quickly, and he was rushed to the hospital. For a few hours, there was still hope. But shortly after, doctors confirmed the worst: he didn't make it. A career that looked destined for the very top had been cut short in a devastating way. Speculation came fast. Some believed he had choked on food. Others suggested a possible heart attack. With no official details at first, social media and bodybuilding forums exploded with theories and heated debates. In moments like this, uncertainty often makes the emotional impact even heavier. What really happened that night? Just before the incident, Dallas had spoken with his girlfriend, Dana Brooke. According to reports, he simply said he was going to eat dinner. Nothing dramatic. No sign of an emergency. No final words that hinted at what was about to unfold. It was an ordinary conversation, and maybe that's what makes it even harder to process. His unexpected death wasn't just the loss of a talented athlete. It was a collective shock. A moment that forced the sport to confront uncomfortable realities. How could someone who appeared so strong, disciplined, and determined pass away so suddenly? Days later, the autopsy report provided answers, but also brought an even deeper shock. The official cause of death was a heart attack. But the condition of Dallas's body revealed a far more complex picture. This wasn't about one isolated factor. It was a combination of severe stressors placed on his system over time. The most striking detail was his heart. It weighed about 833 grams, nearly 3 times the average adult male heart, which typically weighs under 300 grams. The left ventricle was severely enlarged, and there were plaques blocking all of his coronary arteries. That kind of condition dramatically increases the risk of fatal arrhythmias. The unavoidable question is, how does someone so young reach that level of cardiac damage? And it wasn't just the heart. His liver was roughly 4 times its normal size. His kidneys were also severely enlarged and showed significant damage, including nephrosclerosis. His lungs had extensive fibrosis, meaning healthy tissue had been replaced with scar tissue. On top of that, thyroid cancer was present. Overall, it painted the picture of a body that had been operating at its absolute limit for a long time. Toxicology tests detected high levels of trenbolone, a powerful anabolic steroid commonly known in the US bodybuilding world as tren. Caffeine and marijuana were also found in his system. While he wasn't officially tested for excessive insulin levels, there were indications that it may have been used. Additionally, many athletes at that level use human growth hormone, HGH, which can contribute to organ enlargement, including the heart. The list of risk factors was nearly complete: high LDL cholesterol, low HDL, elevated liver enzymes, chronic coughing, and severe shortness of breath. The report showed a body under constant, relentless stress. The autopsy didn't just explain the cause of death, it exposed the invisible cost of pushing the human body beyond its natural limits. After the autopsy details became public, an unavoidable conversation took over the sport: the role of performance-enhancing substances in professional bodybuilding. Hormone and steroid use isn't new in this world, but Dallas's case pushed the topic straight into the spotlight. How much do these substances really impact performance, and what's the true price the body ends up paying? Human growth hormone, known as HGH here in the US, is often linked to increased muscle mass and faster recovery. But one of its potential side effects is abnormal organ growth, including enlargement of the heart. When the heart muscle grows beyond a healthy limit, the risk of arrhythmias and heart failure rises dramatically. What looks like an aesthetic advantage on stage can hide a silent internal danger. Then there's trenbolone, commonly called Tren, one of the most powerful anabolic steroids used in bodybuilding. It's known to significantly raise LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, and blood pressure. That imbalance creates the perfect environment for arterial plaque buildup and cardiovascular strain. And when stacked with other compounds, the stress on the body can become even more aggressive. Long-term anabolic steroid use, especially at high doses, has been associated with an increased risk of sudden cardiac death. This goes far beyond aesthetics or performance, it's about systemic health. Internal organs, the endocrine system, and cardiovascular balance can all be deeply affected, sometimes in ways that can't be reversed. The human body has limits, even when it looks superhuman on the outside. The case of Dallas McCarver highlighted the extreme risks tied to substance abuse at the highest levels of the sport. The pursuit of physical perfection can come with consequences that never show up in stage photos. Dallas was just 26 years old, an age when many athletes are only beginning to hit their physical prime. He was seen as one of modern bodybuilding's brightest prospects, someone who could have contended at Mr. Olympia for years. His potential was real. His size was extraordinary, often competing well over 260 pounds, about 118 plus kilos. His drive was undeniable. And yet, in a moment, it was all gone. His death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It sparked deep reflection inside the sport. Where is the line in extreme bodybuilding? Is there an invisible boundary between elite performance and self-destruction? When an athlete becomes a symbol of absolute strength and, at the same time, an example of biological fragility, the sport is forced to confront itself. His case is now frequently referenced as a warning about the dangers of performance drug abuse. This isn't about judgment, it's about reality. The body responds to stimulus, but it also reacts to excess. And when warning signs are ignored for too long, the consequences can become permanent. How many athletes today might be walking the same path without realizing it? Beyond substances, there's also aesthetic pressure. The demand for bigger, denser, more extreme physiques creates an environment where normal no longer exists. Professional ambition, combined with industry expectations and fan hype, can push competitors beyond their natural limits. What starts as passion can slowly turn into a dangerous race against your own biology. Dallas McCarver's story doesn't erase his talent or his dedication. But it leaves behind a powerful warning, not just for athletes, but for fans and the entire bodybuilding community. It forces a question worth reflecting on: what does success really mean? If this story made you think, drop your perspective in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And stick with the channel for more stories that reveal the backstage realities and the hard lessons behind the biggest names in the sport.